It is Friday, July 12th. Let's talk PlayStation. So admittedly, this was more of a quiet news week for PlayStation, not really a whole lot going on, but you know we still have some things to discuss. But first we'll go over that PlayStation Plus Instant Game Collection reminder. So for the month of July 2019, it is Horizon Chase Turbo and Detroit Become Human, not PES. That's still the same, so keep that in mind. You have until July to download these games. Now our first news story was pretty interesting because Xbox Germany made a pretty big mistake over on Facebook. They posted a video claiming that Final Fantasy VII Remake was coming to Xbox One March 3rd, 2020. This is of course not true. Xbox quickly took the video down. Square Enix apologized later on, saying that no, the game's only coming to PlayStation 4 right now. It's not planned for any other platforms. Xbox also apologized, saying that no, that was made in error. You know, how does something like this happen? Well, you probably have some inexperienced person managing that social media page. This is pretty common knowledge that the game is not coming to Xbox. It's currently a PlayStation 4 exclusive, so it's not a matter of, oh, the game's coming to Xbox. It's a matter of that was definitely a human error, and really a matter of somebody that really doesn't know what they're doing that made that post. So that's quite puzzling there. But the thing is, this still brings up the conversation of, you know, how long will this game stay exclusive to PlayStation 4? Because that's something that I think a lot of people are forgetting, is that when this game was announced back in 2015 during Sony's E3 press conference, it said it was coming first to PlayStation 4. Those are very deliberate words, and of course Final Fantasy VII is a major, major IP. It's a big game. It's probably going to do very well on PlayStation 4, but it's going to do very well on many platforms once it inevitably comes out in those platforms. That's in Square Enix's best interest, and we know that they're probably going to heavily pursue that whenever whatever deal in place with Sony is up. So it's just a matter of how long that actually is, whether it's 6 months, a year, maybe it'll be a little bit beyond that, who knows. But I mean, surely this game will come to PC, Xbox at some point, maybe some streaming services. I mean, Square's going to want to put this game on pretty much everywhere. And sure, the game will do fine on PS4, but they want to make a lot of money. And so that's just something to keep in mind, is that, yeah, this game is still technically a timed exclusive, unless Sony did something to secure the game even further, but that's not very probable. Now, for our next news story, Cyberpunk 2077, the UI director Alvin Liu recently did an interview discussing how the console development is actually going to be considered first-class platforms. So he's quoted as saying, "Actually, no, we have a very custom engine, the Red Engine, and actually we're targeting consoles as first-class platforms, and it looks amazing there. So obviously, if you spent, $2,000 building your PC rig, it's going to look better on that. But the graphics are quite amazing for what you're going to get from Cyberpunk 2077 on consoles and low-end PCs." I like this quote because it's just kind of more of a reminder for people that, like, look, these machines, as dated as they are, we're still getting games that look really incredible, and Cyberpunk is very impressive looking, no doubt. It's a beautiful looking game, and you've got a situation now where even though PS4 and Xbox One still MSRP for $250, $300, I mean, you can get them on sale all the time. Used, you can get them even cheaper, and you're getting these really incredible, beautiful looking games. And certainly there are instances of a lot of pre-release situations during trade shows and whatnot where you're seeing games be demoed and they look much better than how they look when they come out to release, but there's still a lot of great examples of games that ship looking absolutely fantastic. And I always go back to something like either God of War or even Ready at Dawn's The Order 1886, which that game came out in 2015, but The Order still looks absolutely phenomenal. So it's always a good reminder that we always want to get into the minutia of graphics, performance, frame rate, resolution, but my God, these games still look pretty damn good. And certainly if you do spend well over $1,000, which it's weird that some people need to be reminded this, but if you spend over $1,000, yeah, surely you're going to get a better looking game. I mean, I certainly hope I get a better looking game when I spend upwards of that much money, but you're still getting, even if you have a lower end PC or if you've got a PS4 and Xbox One, you're still getting a great performance out of these games, out of these consoles. So I just really enjoyed that one. Now, we've got another rumor about The Last of Us Part 2 release date, and it is once again pointing towards February 2020. So initially we had some rumors not that long ago that the game was delayed internally, pushed to the first half of 2020 and possibly January, February, somewhere around there. Then we had a situation where the actress Ashley Johnson almost made it slip of like, oh, I think the game's coming out in February, but then she was cut off. It seemed like that's what she was saying. And now we've got industry insider Daniel Ahmad claiming that the game is actually very much so dated for February 2020, and he also noted that the game has 4 editions being released. So a standard edition, special edition, collector's edition, and an Ellie edition. We don't have any details about what that means exactly. Certainly you'd probably expect the Ellie edition or collector's edition to have, a steel book, a statue, maybe some little pendants or something like that. Who knows? But if you do want those editions, keep in mind right now, as expensive as they may be, you probably are going to want to buy them. Maybe this time it'd be different and they'd manufacture a lot of them, but the post-pandemic edition for The Last of Us on PS3 is now actually quite rare. And so the statue for that edition back then now goes for upwards of $800 some odd, and if you have the full post-pandemic edition, I believe it goes for about $1,500. So, I mean, I would hope this time around they understand that the game's going to sell very well, so they'll manufacture a lot of those special editions if you're into it, but I wouldn't really take my chances this time around. They might still do a very low quantity of that highest edition, which you would assume is the Ellie Edition. However, this is the second or third time now where we're being pointed towards February. It seems like that's definitely going to be the case, and we've got a lot of sources at this point pointing us towards that. We got an actress that's almost indirectly stated sometime in the early part of that year, so it seems like that's certainly what we're expecting right now. And again, if that is when we're going to get the game, I mean, early 2020 is packed with some really good looking games, so there's not going to be much of a shortage of games to play after Christmas, that's for sure. Moving on, we've got another little factoid about inside game development about God of War, and this time it's not from Cory Barlog, surprisingly, but rather Stig Asmussen. So if you don't know, Stig was originally the director on God of War 3. He also had roles on God of War 1 and 2. He was not there for the recent release, but he's been with the franchise for a while. Well, recently, during a discussion with Game Informer, he said that Kratos' first name was almost his name, Stig. So originally during development of the franchise, the working title of the game was actually Dark Odyssey, and Kratos' name was supposed to be Dominus or Dominus, something like that effect. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, but that was the working title for Kratos. And so a bunch of developers at Santa Monica at the time wrote down a bunch of names for what they think Kratos' name should be and gave that to marketing. And so when Stig turned in his list of names, he wrote down his own name as like, hey, this is from Stig, here are my names. But apparently it came back as to where his name was being considered. So he was quoted as saying, "We were trying to figure out Kratos' name, and we were working with marketing on that, and David Jaffe opened it up to the team. Kratos' working name for a long time was Dominus, but marketing didn't like that. I don't know how many members of the team submitted names, but I submitted maybe a handful of them, and they went to marketing, and they came back with 4, maybe 5 names for Kratos. Kratos was one of them, and Stig was one of them. I totally would have been cool with it." It's always funny to hear stories like this just to find out what could have been, and just placing myself in there, say, as a fly on the wall, just kind of watching the development of, say, the first game and thinking, like, man, these guys are so used to not calling it God of War and not calling him Kratos that it almost felt weird once they settled on those names, and how marketing very much so has a very large say in the project sometimes, which you can sometimes argue marketing should get out of the way of development of the game and the artistic direction of the game. But then you have a scenario like this where marketing was actually, settling on Kratos and settling on changing the name to God of War, and that's how we know the franchise today. So always fascinating stuff to hear about how a game came to be today. Now let's get into Dreamz. We haven't talked about that early access beta in a while, but apparently it's still doing good. So during a conversation with MCV UK, Mark Healy, who is the co-founder of Media Molecule and the creative director, he was quoted as saying, "We want to do a bit of a slow build-up so that we can iron out any obvious problems before we put it in front of too many people's faces. And the quality of the community is amazing, which was something we'd really hoped for and something that we put particular effort into. Targeting certain people that we know would be right for Dreamz, primarily a lot of Little Big Planet creators, for example, but not just that. My experience is that it's very good-natured. Lots of people who are willing to help each other out and collaborate. So I think there's a nice, happy feeling in the community we've got so far." I wanted to mention this because as it stands right now, Dreamz is doing okay. I'm sure it's doing fine in terms of how Media Molecule's viewing it and handling it, and I'm sure the community loves it. A lot of people are really enjoying the game, but it's still appealing to such a small amount of people, and I just wish this game would have more of a substantial impact, like the same magic we had in 2008 with Little Big Planet, where it was a very accessible game, everybody bought it, didn't matter what kind of games or genres you were into. I mean, everybody played the game and had a lot of fun with it, even if they weren't good at creating, they were still playing a lot of creations and things like that. And again, there was a certain magic to it. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember what I'm referring to. But the thing is, Dreamz is just not really having that, and maybe that's because it has been so lukewarm in terms of the rollout, which is that it's an early access, only a handful of people are really in it right now, and it's mostly creators. Obviously, there's no story content or anything like that. It's a lot of tutorials, a lot of sharing creative ideas and things like that, but also feedback between Media Molecule and the community. So I understand that there's not a big push for the game right now, but I hope that when this game does have an actual release, right, a traditional release where it comes out on disc and it comes out with this full-fledged amount of story content, I hope there's a big push from not only Media Molecule, but certainly Sony. I want Sony to back this game. I really hope this isn't a scenario where Sony is just letting Media Molecule kind of run their course with this project and then obviously the game doesn't do all that well because not only is Sony not promoting it, but the game just isn't really getting a whole lot of steam from, you know, the community and gamers in general. You know what I mean? I don't want this game to sour out flat. I want it to have this big push, but as it stands, it seems like it's still very much so this back and forth in between the creative community and Media Molecule, and not much else beyond that. It's just worrying to me. I want the game to do well. Now we've got another news story that's more of an interesting tidbit, but again, slow news week, and it's just kind of cool. But if you saw Spider-Man Far From Home this past week, you might have noticed there was a little nod to Spider-Man PS4 in that movie. Now, I haven't actually seen the movie myself just yet, but the nod is very purposeful. It's certainly talking about, or it's referencing the Spider-Man PS4 release, which is cool. These are completely separate entities. They weren't tied together in any way, shape, or form. You know, the game development and the movie studio, they were entirely separate in terms of not only their story and their approach to Spider-Man, but it's just they weren't tied in together whatsoever. So it was cool that there was a bit of a nod in there. And also, apparently when Insomniac saw this, they applauded. They were super pumped about it, and I'm sure that must have felt great for them to see that and you know, have their big little shout out on the big screen. I thought that was pretty cool, and so just throwing that one out there as well. But while we're on the topic of movies, that's a good segue into our next news story about the Uncharted movie. So the current director, and let's keep that in mind, the current director, Dan Trachtenberg, recently said that the Uncharted movie is not going to adapt any of the game's stories. It's very much so going to be its own contained thing, and goes into what we've been saying before about PlayStation Productions and their aim with movies, and, you know, the best way to probably approach a video game movie is to not, you know, turn a game into a movie because you're condensing it so much and you're just making a lesser version of it. That's more or less what he was getting into. And, you know, I think a lot of us can really agree with that. Don't make a lesser experience. Kind of do your own thing that maybe has some nods and references, certainly, but, you know, live within that space and tell a different story that can give us some continuity and more reference and in-depth look into the characters and things like that. And certainly seeing them in a live-action role. And that's more or less what he was saying. But he also kind of ended it off with like a weird quote saying that he thinks that the movie could even get to a point where it would influence Naughty Dog back if Naughty Dog were to do another Uncharted movie, or Uncharted game, excuse me. I don't know, that seemed weird to me, to almost come off like that, like, oh yeah, this movie's going to be so good that even Naughty Dog will want to take cues from it. Well, I mean, maybe. Let's see the movie first, and we'll see how that turns out. As it stands right now, still slated for 2020 at some point, with Tom Holland playing a young Nathan Drake. That's still all we know right now. So, we've got a new update on the console manufacturing in China and the trade tariff story that we've been following for a little bit now. There's a new report claiming that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo are looking into offloading about 30% of their manufacturing efforts outside of China into another territory. And this is going into a number of different efforts from other companies that are manufacturing in China currently. A lot of PC manufacturers like HP, Dell, I know Amazon's in there, a bunch of the usual suspects, right? But major companies that manufacture tech products looking to move about 30% into another territory based on how important the U.S. market is. That's what the report claims. Now, this could obviously reference bringing these jobs back to the U.S., but the thing is that's probably not in any way, shape, or form going to happen, because I think what a lot of people are forgetting is that, well, this could just be moved to another territory in the possible Asia-Pacific region. Mexico's the usual suspect. I believe Sony's done some manufacturing in China for the PlayStation 3, and surely they've probably done a lot of manufacturing outside of China and more in South America. So, I mean, there's a lot of avenues where these companies can look at to kind of scoot away from that tariff. And the thing is, I mean, when we talk, and this gets into the politics of it, but you can't necessarily just bring all these jobs to the U.S., because the factories and the labor would be astronomically expensive, and you'd have consoles that cost well over, you know, $600-700. It'd be something crazy like that, right? Like, Apple's been pretty forward about this as well, which is that, you know, Apple already charges an exorbitant amount of money for their products, and they're just going to increase that even more if they were to any way, shape, or form have to have an Apple product produced in the U.S. Now, they did have the Mac Pro, the 2013 Mac Pro, I believe, manufactured in the U.S. Now, keep in mind that's still the Mac Pro. That's already at an incredibly steep premium, but that's also a Pro machine. It's a very low volume machine, so I feel like that's one scenario where they kind of got away with doing something like that. You know, that's kind of the only really scenario where we're in right now, where it's like, if it's a really low volume product, that's where you can maybe make the case for it being manufactured in the U.S. But when it's something of such high volume, not only does the U.S. not necessarily have a lot of the workers for that, because there's not many people that have experience with tech like that. The thing is, when you go to a place like China, where there's factories left and right, and then they are a territory that's well known for the cheap manufacturing of goods, I mean, you've got a huge workforce. And I'm not saying this goes into the debate of the worker conditions or anything like that. That's certainly a different discussion altogether, and it's a very important discussion to have. But just saying that why these companies do this is because the workforce is there, right? You've got these people that, even if they don't work at one company or they get laid off or they, leave one factory, they can just go to another, get hired immediately, and they already are on the assembly line and they know what they're doing. That's kind of what a lot of these companies make a case for when it comes to the workers not being there. You can't just do that in the U.S., not for such a large-scale mass market product with a lot of these smaller consumer electronics. And so that's why it's a very multifaceted issue. It goes into a number of different avenues, not just the politics aspect of it, but also the workers' rights and things like that. That's why it's such a complicated conversation to have. But at the very least, from what we can say right now, is that's why Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft are very much so joining all these other companies that really want to figure out how to scoot away from this 25% tariff, because it has major implications on not only the cost of the product, but that in turn leads to the cost of the games, the development costs, how well these games will do sales-wise, monetization-wise after the game ships. It's a domino effect. If you do one substantial thing at the very front end, the very back end gets affected as well. If we get any more major developments in this story, let me know if you'd like to keep hearing them. I'm not sure if this is a topic a lot of you really care about, but please let me know. Now let's get into Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you could win a $10 PSN code. I'd like to congratulate Joshua Ford. You have won a $10 PSN credit. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Now, if you would like to win a $10 PlayStation Network code, it's so simple. Follow the link down below to the Gleam website. We do this every single week on Let's Talk PlayStation. Supporting the channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and the winner will be announced next week. With all that said, those are the news stories I wanted to talk about with you guys from this past week. So our Tuesday video was 36 random Japanese PlayStation games from eBay. Really weird stuff. We got 36 games, so 12 PS1, PS2, and PS3. And we even played some of the games in that video too, so go check that out if you haven't already. I know you guys really enjoy the unboxing videos, and we'll certainly do more of them. Now, our Tuesday video, I can't tell you what it is, mostly because I'm working on multiple projects at the same time, so I'm not sure which one I'll have ready by Tuesday, but as always, stay tuned for that Tuesday video. Support your boy, like the video, go check it out, because, it's probably going to be pretty dope. Now, I'm biased, but I think you guys can agree that it probably will be pretty cool. I mean, you guys have been so supportive recently, which is awesome. I really appreciate your continued viewership. You guys are so awesome, so nice, so supportive. We have good discussions. As always, follow on Twitter at Mystic Ryan if you want to talk with me more personally up there. But as always, just thank you so much. You're awesome. And if I ever see you in person, I owe you one free hug. So keep that in mind. You are entitled to a hug if you ever see me. But other than that, that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.